Hello, my name is Daniel.omorain, and this is the introduction to the course Clinical Research Associate Excellence. The goal of this course is to share with the CRA and the clinical research community the skills and tools that I have gleaned over my 20-year clinical research career, with the objective to raise the quality of work and the efficiency in the CRA community. This is not an academically oriented course, but instead, this is a deck plates, how to get the job done oriented course. There are several audiences that this course is directed to. First of all, I want to distinguish between people who work for the PI, and people who work for the CRO or the sponsor. When I started my career about 20 years ago, people who worked for the PI were called coordinators, and people who worked for the CRO or the sponsor who traveled from site to site to site were called clinical research associates or CRAs. Now the term CRA is used for both site staff as well as the traveling staff. So to distinguish those two roles, I'm going to refer to the people who work for the PI as coordinators and the people who work for the CRO or the sponsor as clinical research associates or simply CRAs. So this course is directed toward three groups of people. First is study coordinators and CRAs who have more than 6 months experience doing their jobs. The second group is experienced CRAs and coordinators who want to improve the quality and the efficiency of their work. And the third group is lead CRAs, sometimes called clinical trial managers, CTMs. Leads or CTMs who are looking for ideas and tools on how to get their staff to be more productive and more efficient and enjoy their jobs more so that they'll stay at their jobs longer. Throughout this course, I am going to try to emphasize one idea throughout all of the different classes. And that idea is that of the importance of doing a timely and a complete assessment. I am a registered nurse, and in the nursing community, there's something called the nursing process. The initialism is ADPIE, that I have made it into an acronym, ADPI. The A stands for assessment, D, diagnosis, P, plan, I, intervention, and E, evaluation. Almost every organization has some variation of that process that the nurses call the nursing process. In the military, they have something called the OODA loop, and that stands for observe, orient, decide, and act. But essentially, it's the same thing. The first step in both of them is assessment. My contention is if you do a thorough and timely assessment Everything else after that will be easy, and you will be on your way to becoming an excellent CRA. But if you don't do a thorough and timely assessment, any success that you have will be due mostly to luck. You must do a thorough and timely assessment. And if you think about it, what I'm proposing is what you do throughout life for important tasks. So let's say that you are planning for a job interview. You want to do a complete assessment, as complete as you can. You want to know as much about the company as you can, about the job that you're proposing to do. You want to know about the interviewer. You even want to know about the software that's going to be used for the interview. Using a different scenario, let's say someone sets you up on a blind date. You want to do a very thorough and timely assessment. You want to know, what does the person look like? How old is the person? What does the person do for an occupation? What kinds of interests do they have? You want to know a lot. Where do they live? So what I'm proposing is a lot like that, but I am going to make it very structured and thorough. So this course is outlined into the following classes. The first class is onboarding and SOP training. The next class is learning the study. The next class is learning your sites, and that class is directed obviously mostly to the CRAs. The next class is conducting the monitoring visit. The next class is doing your job, either the coordinator or the CRA. And the last is what I call lagniappe. I believe it's a French word, and it means just assortment of everything else that is sort of interesting and entertaining. That section will be things that I have learned along the way that don't necessarily fit into the previous classes. So I want to tell you a little bit about my background so that way you know where I'm coming from. I actually have a bachelor's degree in business. My father thought that business was the thing to do, and he had a very forceful personality. I would describe it as 50% narcissist, 50% bully, and 100% drunk. And it was very difficult to say no to that guy. And my job in the family was basically to figure out how to keep his mood in the civil range. And one way I did that was by doing what he asked. So anyway, I got a bachelor's degree in business. I worked for a year as a general manager, mostly dining room and bar of a Mexican restaurant in Connecticut. That was interesting because I learned sort of the hard way what happens if you let people set their own standards. I learned about how to work with a boss who is not very reasonable or fair. And I learned about the obviously the food service industry and the kind of people who work there. This is my take. People who walk out of work with $200 in cash in their pocket, it's a different culture. After that, I worked for 2 years as a general manager of a very small plastics manufacturing plant in Connecticut. I did almost everything production scheduling, inventory management, payroll, accounts payable, customer liaison, a little bit of sales, negotiating contracts, that kind of thing. Then I went to the Navy. I was on active duty for 4 years. I was an East Coast sailor. I learned a lot about a lot of things. But one thing I learned a lot about was leadership. The military is huge on leadership. And to be honest with you, when I was in the Navy, the whole idea of leadership was rather confusing to me. I didn't know what it was. I didn't know what it would look like. I see movies that they have a muscle-bound sergeant who says, "Let's go, follow me," who is basically an intimidator. I've seen things that look like leadership, but it's actually just superficial charisma. The military has some of that. They used to have quite a bit of it, not so much anymore. Politics has a lot of people who are good at the charisma, but not good at anything else. So what I've learned about leadership while I was in the Navy and after the Navy is this. To me, leadership is, where are we? Where are we going? And how are we going to get there? Then you have to come up with the steps to figure out how to assess if you're on track. I read a lot of history, a lot of military history. My hero is an admiral in World War II named Spruance. He was called the Quiet Warrior. He was sort of an intellectual. He was logical and methodical and calm and deliberate. He was not charismatic. There was another admiral who was very well known named Halsey, who was very charismatic and liked by a lot of people. But Spruance was actually a more successful admiral. And Spruance had what I consider to be good leadership. He demanded a thorough assessment. He and his staff came together with a plan, and then they executed the plan. And they executed things according to the plan from A to Z, unless something interfered with their plan. But basically, once they made the plan, they were going to execute the plan. So to me, that's what leadership is, and it works in clinical research as well. Where are we? Where are we going? And how are we going to get there? Okay, so from my clinical research experience, I've been doing this work since about 2003. Before that, I was a study coordinator on 3 prostate cancer studies. That was very interesting, but also very easy. Then I became an RN, worked on a med-surg floor for a year, learned a lot about people, and a lot about nursing and veterans. Then I was lucky enough that PRA had a course basically on how to treat or how to train people who had no CRA experience into being a CRA. It was the most comprehensive, valuable training I have ever done. It even included the instructor telling us, do not put 2 things into the same hand because you'll drop one of them and you'll look clumsy. And she was right. Anyway, I went from there to becoming a CRA. I worked on a pulmonary study for a year, phase 2. I traveled a bunch. I made chairmans in US Air in 1 year. I had so much status, I didn't know what to do with it. I was a traveling fool. After that, I got to oncology, and that was a gift. Initially, it was excruciating. In fact, when I first started and I went to the training, these were the old days when you went to the CRO to train. I watched a VCR tape that was my protocol training. The quality of the recording was poor. The person who presented the training was not a native English speaker, and he was very difficult to understand, and the content was well over my pay grade. So I went to my manager and I said, listen, I just did the protocol training. And if you think that based on that training, and am now eligible to do visits, you're wrong, because I understood about 30% of it. So I recommend that you replace me with someone else. Fortunately, she was more level-headed than I. She said, Dan, that tape was put together by the sponsor. The guy who presented it had a PhD in chemistry or pathophysiology, and it was a recording of a investigators meeting that the audience was other PIs. That's why the content was so over your head, because it was not directed toward you. So anyway, I stayed on. It was good for me because I like oncology. It's very challenging. It's tough. You have to pay attention. You really, really have to pay attention. But I like it. Okay, most of my visits have been done in the Northeast, from Cleveland to Boston, Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, Washington, at most of the cancer centers. Another reason why I like oncology is because I've had a lot of good luck with PIs. Normally, physicians who go into oncology are what I call feelers. They care about people. They are not brutes. They're not bullies. The other end of the continuum a little bit is surgeons. They seem to be a little bit more direct and just at the other end of that continuum. I call those folks actors. So anyway, why I created this course. So I've been doing this work for 20 years. I worked with a lot of different kinds of CRAs, really, really good ones, and some not so good ones. And I'm finding not so good ones more and more recently. Part of that has to do with there's such a demand for CRAs that people are brought into the role before they're probably ready or qualified. And I feel bad for those people because they want to do a good job, but because of the way that the business is now, there's not a lot of time invested in CRA training. So I see a lot of desperation and fear and confusion in CRAs. And I try to help out when I can, but I think that when CROs negotiate contracts with sponsor, now the hours that are allocated to training is less and less and less. And what happens is CROs hire CRAs in a sort of a sink or swim. And the sink turns out to be house cleanings. which is very sad and unfortunate, and I don't like it, but that's the way it is. Like I was saying before, I wanted to not be a business major. My dad sort of intimidated me into doing that. What I really wanted to be was a teacher. My fantasy job is to be a science teacher in a high school. I just think science is interesting. So what I'm doing now is sort of actualizing my desire or my fantasy to be a teacher. I have a lot of things to share, a lot of tools to share, tricks, shortcuts, things that'll make your life better. Although I have to be honest up front, a lot of them require some investment in time and work in order to make the tools that make your job easier. But if you're interested and you want to learn it, I'll show you how to do it. Okay, this course is pro bono. I'm not looking to be paid. I don't have an account for people to send me money, although I might set that up. I forgot what that vendor is called. In the description of this YouTube, I'll have my email to my work account. You're welcome to email me anytime. If you just have a question, I'll help you. If you want me to send you some of the my workbooks, I'll send you a template. But feel free to email me with any old question you have. I have seen what happens to CRAs who don't ask questions. They go through a lot of pain. I've also seen what happens when people ask questions in a meeting setting that are inappropriately revealing. It's embarrassing. If you should know something that you don't, it's embarrassing if you ask the question. So you can ask me whatever you want. I actually had a site visit. The coordinator resigned that morning. They found a replacement, and I arrived, and the person said, "Could you please remind me, what does CRF stands for again?" So this person was a neophyte, which actually I kind of like neophytes. I either like rock stars or neophytes. Anyway, so email me with questions or not. Lastly, the next section of the introduction is going to be on my perspective and thoughts on the difference between excellence and perfection. Excellence is an honorable thing. It's a fun thing. It's a rewarding thing. But perfection is a painful thing. It's a frustrating thing. It's a counterproductive thing. And I want to share with you my thoughts on each of those and caution you that if you're desiring perfection, this course will help you. But it will also cause even more pain. So, section 2 of the introduction will be on perfection versus excellence, and that is to follow. So stand by.